Hello everyone, I'm Priyadarshini Mahara, faculty at the Department of Buddhist Studies, University of Delhi. Today I'm going to talk to you about module number 14 or paper number 11, Philosophy of Buddhism. So here this particular module is entitled as the keynote on Mandal and Mudras. So Mandal can also be called as Mandalas. So here the title of this paper is Keynote on Mandalas and Mudras. We would be studying about what Mandal is and what Mudras are. Let us begin with Mandal. As the word Mandal is form of Indian classical language of Sanskrit, but loosely it is termed as or translated as mean circle. In common language, mandal is far more than a simple shape. Here it is the representative of the wholeness and can see as the model for proper organized structure of life in itself. So when we're talking about mandal, in a way it means a circle. But here it means proper organized structure of life itself. Cosmic diagram of mandal remind us our relation to the infinite, the world that extends both beyond and within our bodies and minds. When we talk about cosmic existence of the diagram of mandala, we see that it is something that lies beyond the infinite world and talks about something that is beyond our bodies and minds. It, however, describes an idea about the material and the non-material reality which is representing the phenomenal entity as shunyata. It is symbol of spiritualism and ritualism in Indian religion, which represents the universe. Here in the mandala, the basic form of mandal is squaring with 4 gates constituting of a circle with a center point. Each gate is the one square is in shape of T. As mandal often exhibits the radical balance in terms of religion concept. The exact meaning of this word from Sanskrit point of view is manda, which means essence, and la, which means container. So when we break this term into 2 halves, one we have manda and the other one we have la. So here manda means essence and la means container. So together it is known as possessor or also called as signpost. Now when we look at this particular word mandal, we see that mandal in Buddhism is seen as Buddhist sand art. In Buddhism, it is very important part of tantric practices. Mandal is easily found in the form of the stup and text called Atanitya Sut in the part of Pali canon of Dignikai. When we talk about mandal, we see that it is generally found in the form of a stup and also the text of Dignikai. This text is vigorously chanted in Buddhism. In Tibetan, this art is called Dusong Kil Khor, which means mandala of colored powders. Sand painting is an ancient Tibetan art form. The sand mandala is carefully constructed from dyed sand particles to represent the particular esoteric textual traditions of Buddhism. It is a transient art form thought to have originated in India and been transferred in the Middle Ages to Tibet. The sand mandala is constructed as vehicle to generate compassion, realize the impermanence of reality, and a social or cosmic healing of the environment. So when we look at this particular term mandal and the sand mandala, it is constructed as a vehicle to generate compassion. So it becomes a vehicle which generates compassion. Then it is the one that realizes the impermanence of reality, the so-called reality. So when we talk about the reality of the Samriti Satya, we are here pointing out to the mere form of illusion. And this is realized by the help of sand mandal, and also the social as well as the cosmic healing of the environment. So there's some sort of an aura that comes into existence when we draw the sand mandal, and it tries to make us more compassionate. It tries to bring in compassion. It tries to make us realize the impermanence of the so-called reality, and also heals our environment in every possible way. In Tibetan Buddhism, we see that this term mandala is an imaginary place or a palace that is contemplated during meditation. Each object in the palace has a significance, representing some aspect of wisdom or reminding the meditator of some guiding principle. So when we look at this term mandala in Tibetan Buddhism, we see that there is a certain amount of focus that is required and an imagination describing a palace. Now this palace is not the materialistic palace that we're talking about. Rather, it is a palace where the objects are representing or are significant of some aspect of wisdom or reminding the meditator of some guiding principle. Various scriptural texts dictate the shapes, forms, and colors of the mandalas. There are many different mandal, each with different lessons to teach and blessings to confer. Most mandalas contain a host of deities, symbolic archetypes of the landscape of mind. So we see that they have been described in various ways and forms by various practitioners, but they also contain a host of deities, symbolic archetypes of landscape of the mind. Among the Tibetan arts, paintings with colored sand ranks as one of the most unique and exquisite. So when we have these paintings with colored sand, they are considered to be most unique. So even when we talk about the Tibetan form of paintings and art forms, we see that there are these paintings called Thanka paintings. These paintings are done with perfect accuracy and with a lot of vegetable dyed colors. And it is bright and beautiful. Within those paintings also you will find a lot of mandala descriptions and forms of mandals signifying various issues and sources or the teachings of Buddha. Now let us come to another section, which is wisdom and impermanence. How mandals are related to wisdom and impermanence. In the mandala, the outer circle of fire usually symbolizes wisdom. Okay, suppose now we look at the mandala, which would be like a round thing. So the outer circle of fire symbolizes wisdom. The ring of 8 channels, grounds, represent the Buddhist exhortation to be always mindful of death and the impermanence which samsara is sufficed. Such locations were utilized in order to confront and to realize the transient nature of life. So let me repeat this again for you. When we're talking about the circle, we say that the outer circle of fire usually symbolizes wisdom. The ring of 8 channels or grounds represent the Buddhist exhortation to be always mindful of death and the impermanence with which samsara is sufficed. These locations were utilized in order to confront and to realize the transient nature of life. So this is how impermanence and wisdom can be signified or can be viewed through viewing a mandala. Now, let us see what 5 Buddhas are. One well-known type of mandala is the mandala of 5 Buddhas. Archetype Buddha forms embodying various aspects of enlightenment. Such Buddhas are depicted depending on the school of Buddhism and even the specific purpose of the mandala. So when we look at the mandala, it describes 5 Buddhas, defining or signifying the specific purpose of particular mandala. Now, when we come on to the practice of mandala, we see that mandalas are commonly used by Tantric Buddhists as an aid to meditation. The mandala is a support for the meditating person, something to be repeatedly contemplated to the point of saturation, such that the image of the internalized in even the minutest detail and can then be summoned and contemplated at will as clear and vivid visualized image. So when we look at the practice of mandala or practice of developing a mandala, we see that a support for it is more of a support for the meditating person, something to be repeatedly contemplated to point of saturation, such that the image of mandal becomes fully internalized in even the minutest detail and can then be summoned and contemplated at will as clear and vivid visualized image. With every mandala comes what Tucci calls its associated liturgy contained in texts known as tantras, instructing practitioners on how the mandalas should be drawn, built and visualized, and indicating the mantras to be recited during its ritual use. So we see that when we talk about tantra and mantra, we see that mandalas play an important role while tantric practices or while practicing any form of meditation. When we draw a mandal, we have to draw it in certain way that it has significance of its own and of what the context requires. Just randomly building up a mandal does not suffice to what the need for the time is. Therefore, a constant check has to be placed in order to draw a mandal or in order to perform the practice of meditation based on the mandal. By visualizing Pure Lands, one learns to understand experience itself as pure and as the abode of enlightenment. When you have started to visualize about a pure land, then your experience becomes pure and abode of enlightenment. The protection that we need in this view is from our own minds as much as from external sources of confusion. The protection that we're talking about here is the protection from external sources of confusion, from our own minds. When we have our own minds, there's so many times when these confusing states arise, and not just from our own mind but even from the outside world. So this protection is needed, and in many tantric mandalas, this aspect of separation and protection from the outer samsaric world is depicted by the 4 outer circles. First is the purifying fire of wisdom, the Vajra circle, the circle with 8 tombs, the lotus circle. So now just try to understand in a simple way. When we talk about protection from our minds and from outer confusions, we see that when we draw these circles of the mandalas, then the outermost circle is that of fire or wisdom. Then comes the inner circle, which is the Vajra circle, which consists of the Vajra or the weapon. Then comes the inner circle, which is the circle of 8 tombs, and in the inside we have the lotus circle. Now when we look at these 4 circles, the first one talks about the fire of wisdom. The second one talks about the Vajra circle. So you have an object or a weapon that you're trying to focus on, and that is the Vajra circle. Now when we talk about the third circle, that is the circle with 8 tombs. So now why are we focusing on the circle with 8 tombs? That is because, as we've talked earlier, when we try to focus on the 8 tombs, our mind is protected from the mind itself as well as from outer confusion. And inside you have the lotus circle, and that lotus circle signifies the purification of the mind and the pure form of mind that is presented in the end. So the first is the fire circle, then it's the second one is the Vajra circle, the third is the 8 tomb circle, and the fourth one is the lotus circle, which is the purified form of mind. The ring of Vajra forms a connected fence-like arrangement running around the perimeter of the outer mandal circle. As a meditation on impermanence, a central teaching of Buddhism, after days or weeks of creating the intricate pattern of sand mandala, the sand is brushed together into a pile and spilled into a body of running water to spread the blessings of the mandals. So at the end of the day, what you do is you brush up the form of mandal and pick up the sand and throw it or put it into a flowing water, so that purified mind, those 4 stages of circles, where in the end you have the purified mind in the form of lotus circle, that is spread to as many beings as possible through the way of that flowing water. Now when we look at mandalas as offerings, we see that there is a certain other mandala is created as bliss on certain occasion, and it is formed in the name of deity such as Chenrig Zeg, God of Compassion, Manjushri, Avalokiteshwar, etc. A mandal offering in Tibetan Buddhism is a symbolic offering of the entire universe and depict the culture of Buddhism in Tibet. Every intricate detail of these mandalas is fixed in the tradition and has specific symbolic meanings, often on more than one level, and all the symbolic level has its own meaning in the mandalas. Whereas the above mandalas represent the pure surroundings of Buddha, this mandal represents the universe. This type of mandala is used for mandala offerings, during which one symbolic offers the universe to the Buddha or to one's teachers. Within Vajrayana practice, 1 lakh of these mandal offerings can be part of the preliminary practices before a student even begins actual tantric practices, and they are under the process of learning the tantric practices. In tantric, the mandala is one method of purification of consciousness. This mandala is generally structured according to the model of the universe as taught in the Buddhist classic text, the Abhidharma Kosh, with Mount Meru at the center, surrounded by the constituents, oceans, mountains, etc. Every tantric practice or system has its own mandal, and thus each one symbolizes an existential and spiritual approach. So when we look at these tantric practices, then we have various forms of mandalas signifying their own existential and spiritual approaches. So this is all about mandal. We've seen mandalas in general terms in Buddhism, in Tibetan Buddhism, and then various other forms of mandalas that can be drawn or performed in order to benefit the beings. Now, the second keynote that we're talking about is mudras. As the word itself defines, that mudras mean that the spirit seal or gesture and position of hand. This is seen in every form of religion, as well as when you look at these Indian classical forms of dances along with the Western forms. Every form has some or the other mudra, which is the gesture. Some mudras involve entire body and most of largely performed by hands and fingers. All the mudras have its own meaning. Mudras are considered as spiritual gesture which is employed in the iconographic and spiritual practices in Indian religion. It is said to believe that in Tantric Buddhism, 108 mudras were used in the Tantric practices. So we have around 108 mudras in the practice of Tantrism. Different types of mudras in Buddhism. When we talk about different or various types of mudras in Tantric Buddhism or in Buddhism, we see that Tibetan Buddhist deities are often represented with hands and fingers in ritual poses, symbolic of their attributes. Mudra is the Sanskrit term for the symbolic hand gestures used in Buddhist rituals and accordingly in the iconography. Mudras were introduced in Tibet by Padmasambhav, an Indian scholar in the 8th century AD. So Padmasambhav introduced mudras in Tibet when he went to Tibet to exchange ideas and views on Buddhism. They became part of a ritual language involving the use of mantras, mudras, and the thunderbolt spectre or vajra that in Tibet was known only to the higher initiates. A mantra such as sacred syllable Om had to first be visualized, then pronounced as a sound, and finally expressed physically through hand gestures or mudras. Thus, thought, speech, and body, the three vehicles for the divine presence, are called into activity. Through these, one can reach samadhi, the highest state of consciousness. A corresponding idea is inherent in the Tibet Buddhist triad or three jewels, which consist of the Buddha, symbolizing divine wisdom, the law representing the word or verbal teachings, and the Sangh. So we have three jewels, which is Buddha, Sangh, and Dharma. Each hand and each finger has a particular significance. The right hand, for example, is associated with the moon and male principle. So when we talk about this right hand, it is associated with the moon or male principle. It stands for spiritual method. The left hand is associated with the sun and female principle. So we have right hand representing the moon or the male principle, and we have the left hand representing the female or the sun principle. It stands for spiritual wisdom. And when we talk about the right hand, we say that it stands for the spiritual method. And when we talk about the left hand, we say that it stands for spiritual wisdom. Examples of the various mudras can be seen on many statues in museums of Tibetan art collection and in museums catalog and in various other statues of Buddha around the world. So we have Buddha sitting in Bhumi Sparsh Mudra, in Samadhi Mudra, in Dan Mudra. So like these, we have various. So when we're talking about Bhumi Sparsh Mudra, we see that this hand is touched to the ground. Buddha touches the ground. And this is how it is said that this is Bhumi Sparsh Mudra. Then Samadhi, both his hands are like this, and he is in the state of Samadhi. When we talk about the Mudra, which is Dan, we see that he is giving Dan. And so various other forms of mudras, statues with different gestures, are found around the world. So now there's a brief description of several mudras. So first is Abhay Mudra, or protection, reassurance, or blessing. This mudra refers to an episode in Buddha's life when a drunken elephant sent by demon Devdutt threatened to crush him. With this gesture, Buddha appeased the elephant and subdued him. The gesture dispels hesitation and fear, instills confidence and trust in the Dharma, and assures followers of Buddha's protection. So when we have this mudra, which is termed as Abhay Mudra, so can you see the word Bhay plus Abhay? Bhay means fear, and when we saying Abhay, Abhay means the negative prefix here points out to no fear. So there's an entire story about this Abhay Mudra. Then we see the right arm is elevated slightly and it is slightly bent. The hand is level with the shoulder. So there's this shoulder, it is slightly bent, and the fingers are extended upwards and the palm is turned outwards. So it is something like this, which means Abhay Mudra. Then, as I talked to you earlier, we have Bhumi Sparsh Mudra, which is witness or earth touching. With this gesture, Sakyamuni Buddha called upon the earth to witness his victory over the temptations of Mar, or a lord of illusion. The right arm is pendant over the right knee. The hand, palm inward, all fingers down, is touching a lotus throne. So when we look at this particular mudra, we see that the right arm is pendant over the knee, the hand, palm inward, and all fingers down, touching a lotus throne. So it is something like this with your right arm on the knee. The left hand lies on the lap with the palm upwards and in the meditation mudra. Now we have another mudra which is called Anjali Namaskar Mudra, which means prayer, adoration, salutation, or reverence. In India, this gesture indicates salutation and respect. In Buddhist iconography, it symbolizes adoration. If held under the mouth, it indicates homage to the word of the teacher. It is therefore never seen on Buddha himself, as he is subject of reverence. When we talk about Anjali Mudra, we see that Buddha statues are never adorned with this particular mudra because they are considered to be paid as a homage to the Guru, and Buddha, being the revered himself, is not embodied with such mudras. The two hands joined together also symbolizes the static and dynamic, the spiritual and the material worlds. When you have these two hands joined together like this, it is called Anjali Mudra, and they specify they symbolize the static and dynamic, the spiritual and the material worlds. The hands are kept close to the chest in devotional attitude with the palms and fingers pressed together. So when you bring it to the chest, you're bringing them to the devotional attitude. So that is Anjali Mudra. And then we have Dhyan or Samadhi Mudra, which is also known as meditation. This is the highest state of consciousness. Samadhi can be reached by means of tranquility and identification with the Supreme Unity. This gesture of meditation, made with both hands or with the left hand alone, indicates deep samadhi or absolute balance. Both hands are placed in the lap, right hand on left hand, with all fingers extended and the palms facing upwards. Thumbs touch each other. So that is the Samadhi Mudra. Now we have Dharma Chakra Mudra, which is teaching, preaching, turning the wheel of law. This gesture indicates the turning of the wheel of Dharma or law, in which Buddhas, through their teachings, set the Dharma in motion for beings of the 6 realms of existence. Here, both hands are held against the chest, with the left hand facing inwards, covering right hand facing outwards. So it's something like this. The index finger and the thumb of each form a circle or wheel. So these are the mudras, and we have variety. When we talk about mudras, we have 108 mudras only in Tibetan Buddhism. So these mandalas and mudras together form the core of the tantric philosophy as well as Buddhist philosophy. And it is very important to understand what these mudras are and how they are different from the other forms, and the distinguishing features for every mudra. So this is the key concept of mandalas and mudras. Thank you.